समस्त जन कल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्. Everyone wants happiness. Yet, when we look around us, there is only sorrow, sorrow, sorrow. Even great saints have declared, Sarvam Dukkham Dukkham, like Sri Buddha. Nanak Dukhya Sab Sansar. Guru Nanak Sahib says that the entire world you see only miserable. Tan dhar sukhya koi na dekhe, jo dekhya so dukhya hoy. There is no one in this physical form that one has seen happy, says Kabir Das ji. Thus, when we see in the world so much suffering, yet everyone wants happiness, very different from the common man living in ignorance of one's own true, essential, blissful nature, is the enlightened one, the person of steady wisdom, the person who has discovered the truth. Sri Adi Shankaracharya says that whatever are the signs of an enlightened person should be the sadhana, the practice for the seekers. What is natural to the person of perfection should be the sadhana or an attempt by the seeker to emulate, to cultivate, to practice and to grow. When Arjuna asked the question, how does the person of steady wisdom, of realization, meet life situations or go out to meet life situations? How would you describe that person? Somebody once asked Gurudev, how would you describe in one word an enlightened person? And he just said, happy. A simple statement, but speaks a lot, because when we meet anyone, we immediately say, how are you? Response is, fine, thank you. But stay longer than a minute with someone and you'll find that there's nothing fine in anybody's life. The realized master is happy. And people like the company of happy people, not sad and miserable people. And if we want to be likable, we want to be lovable, then it becomes our own duty to be happy, because only a happy person can spread happiness around. And if you watch Gurudev, even if he was in the midst of his work, even if his physical body seemed to be ill, even if he heard about tragedies and calamities that could happen, in midst of that, he would make us laugh away our sorrows. Such a happy person is an evidence that happiness can be gained in this life and in every situation of life, we can be happy. For that, Bhagwan answers Arjuna, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajahati Yada Kaman Sarvan Partha Manogatan Atmanyevatmana Tushtaha Stita Pragyastadochyate. Bhagwan says, Stita Pragya Tada Uchyate. That person is called as a person of steady wisdom when Prajahati Kaman Sarvan Partha Manogata. So Yada, when, Hey Partha, O child of this earth, and reminding Arjuna that you are the child of the very same earth on which lives such a Sreshta Purusha, on which there have been many Sreshta Purushas. And what stops you from being one of those children of the earth? Hey Partha, Prajahati Yada Kaman. Yada, when Prajahati gives up completely Sarvan Kaman, all desires. And where do these desires reside? Manogatan. From the mind, these desires rise in the mind. They are in the mind. And here is a beautiful psychology to understand. That we think the moment we hear that we have to give up anything and give up our desires, people living in the world trying to, from their birth onwards, trying to fulfill their desires, their ambitions, their goals, such people even to think that we can give up desires, and that to all desires, seems to be impossible. But if we understand that desires are there in the mind, and this mind itself, when we temporarily give up in sleep, all desires also vanish, don't they? Therefore, desires are not in us, they are in our mind, and our mind itself is constantly changing. And this mind also rises and goes into dissolution. Temporarily, we experience it in sleep. And if we can give up one desire for another desire, it itself proves that desire for a certain object can be given up. But here Bhagavan says, Prajahati Yada Sarvan Kaman Manogatan. Not one desire. Very often people think, and they used to come up to Gurudev and say, Swamiji, ever since I attended your discourses last time, I have given up drinking tea. Now, giving up anything that you are addicted to, even though it may not be very harmful, but that you are addicted to, you are a slave to, is indeed a great achievement. But the wife standing by says, he has given up tea, but he has taken up coffee. We generally give up one desire for another desire. But one who has given up all desire, how can we give up our desires for which we seem to be living, without which we feel no pleasure in life, no hope in life, and without which we don't see any purpose of life. But as we said, great people like Gurudev, they inquired that after getting what I want, am I happy? And if we inquire, what is it that we want? We think we want objects. We think we want more wealth to have more objects. We think we want status, name, fame, etc. But if we inquire, in midst of all these, what do we really want? A person goes to college, you ask, why do you go to college? Do you go to the college for the sake of college? No, it is to gain knowledge. You ask them, why do you want knowledge? To get a degree. You ask them, why do you want a degree? To get a job. Why do you want a job? To make some income. Why do you want wealth? To get objects. In fact, none of these items are for themselves. And why do we want objects? Not for their own sake. We want only those objects that we can enjoy. And why do we want enjoyment? To be happy. But ask anyone, why do you want to be happy? Gurudev once asked us, why do you want to be happy? We have no answers. Because everything we want is for happiness. But we don't want happiness for something else. Happiness is for its own sake. One who realizes that I am seeking happiness, then one realizes, what is it that I truly want? Otherwise in life, we get what we want. We don't feel satisfied, content and happy. There's a moment of pleasure and then, or even a sense of achievement for a short time, then still there is something more and more and more and more. And psychologically we feel that the more and more and more we get, the happier and happier we will be. But our happiness quotient does not come from getting more and more. Today, even in the largest universities of management, the subjects that are being discussed, the techniques of management that are being propagated, is questioning that is your company making more profits, or is it that your company and the people in the company are happy? Even if you are making a lot of wealth in the company, it will keep you there for some time. You give them more incentive. But if people are not happy in that environment, in that job, or even in a family relationship, for certain gains, they might wait in that situation for some time. But still, if a person is not happy, a person is not going to stay in that job, in that relationship. And staying in that relationship will be always wanting, always dissatisfied, never happy. It is for happiness that we do everything. It is happiness that we want, not a particular object. And therefore, till we get that happiness, there will be a want. However, till we understand that what we are seeking, which type of happiness we are seeking. We wonder sometimes, how did these great people, not only necessarily monks, made such huge sacrifices? When we hear of Sri Taponji Maharaj, Swami Shivanandaji Maharaj, Pujya Gurudev, we wonder who were so capable of getting anything they wanted in the world, wealth, name, prosperity. Everything was available for them and they could achieve it. See what they achieved for the world. Yet, in spite of having everything, Pujya Gurudev finally had a very prestigious job, was moving amongst the elite of Delhi. When he read the books of Swami Shivanandaji Maharaj and went to Rishikesh, and there, when he saw such sadhus, what is it that made him give up desire for all that which he even worked for? Once, we were sitting with Gurudev in a breakfast bhiksha. It was only youngsters. And that day, Gurudev had a bit of a congestion. The weather was very damp and cold. He had a bit of congestion. And normally we were always bubbling, talking to him. And he was talking to us. We were having laughing conversations and always asking him questions and getting such wonderful answers in such good humor that was so easily palatable for us and enjoyable too. We had at that time studied books of Pujya Gurudev, both inspiring, logical and reflective. And there, in Manual of Self-Unfoldment, we used to have our discussions and inquire regarding this very topic, that what are we seeking? Because as youngsters, we are constantly restless. We have hopes and ambitions, but we're constantly restless. That craving is there for more and more and more. And the inquiry was that we seek happiness, but where does happiness lie? If happiness was a nature of any object, if happiness was the nature of any object, then every object should give the same happiness to everyone at all times. But the same object experienced by one may give that person a sense of joy and the other sorrow. If sugar is sweet for everyone, sugar's nature is sweetness. But that we cannot say that every object gives everyone happiness. Thus, happiness is not the nature of the object. Now someone will say a tasty food gives me happiness. The other person doesn't have taste buds. Obviously, it's not going to give him happiness. But even to the same person, at the same period of time, that first piece of chocolate that you eat gives you pleasure. But if you go on overeating, after some time, if someone forces you, like you see in sometimes these weddings, on these engagements, they make the bridegroom eat so many laddus, so many sweets. Looking at it, only you feel nauseating. If happiness was the nature of the object, it should give happiness to everyone at all times. Just like sugar remains sweet to everyone at all times. Fire is hot for everyone at all times. Even if you are going to help someone and you jump into the fire, fire is hot. It will burn. It will not become cold. Even with good intention, you take poison, it will kill you. It is important to understand that happiness is not the nature of the object. Yet, we experience happiness. Then where does that happiness lie? Pujya Gurudev made us inquire that we do experience happiness. So we cannot say that there is no such thing as happiness. We do experience happiness. And if happiness is not the nature of the objects of the world, then happiness is the nature of the subject, the self. But till we come to understand this, at least what we can observe in the world, that world, objective world that we are seeing, experiencing, and every time hoping for happiness, at the end of it, feeling dissatisfied, discontented, and wanting more and more and more, and struggling and struggling and working and laboring to get what we want, and still not happy. Isn't it time that we start inquiring? As youth, Gurudev inquired, and through his life made us inquire also. And we also used to say, there is no happiness in sense object. By the time we had also started conducting, Yuva Kendra classes for the teenagers, our juniors, and teaching them that there is no happiness in sense objects. Yet, as much as we may know this, do we become steady in this pragya? This direct experience of ours that no object gives us happiness at all times, and we can logically understand that happiness is not the nature of objects. Yet, manogatan, the fancy of our mind, that even if we know, somehow or the other, we logically understand, but somehow or the other, we are not able to give up our desire for an object. So anything in the world is an object. We were sitting with Gurudev. He was not so well that day. We knew not to disturb him. We were singing some bhajans. He quietly ate a little bit of the breakfast bhiksha. And just when he was about to leave, the lady of the house, seeing that the weather was cold and there was some congestion that Gurudev had, she said, "May I make you a hot drink?" And she said, "I can make good filter coffee." And Gurudev smiled at her and he said, "Yes." She went and brought the coffee, not in a steel tumbler, in her very delicate crockery. And we were just sitting and watching. And when you say, amongst masters, the most perfect, even to watch Gurudev drink a cup of tea or coffee was to see a piece of art, to see music, to see a dance, to see harmony, to see beauty. In fact, just watching him was meditation. The cup of coffee came, he picked it up, and in midst of his long beard and his mustache, and amazingly, never having droplets on his mustache, he drank one sip from it. His eyes, that used to always be big, bright, and gleaming, in a mischievous way, looked at us as though it was delighted, and then took the next sip, slurping that hot coffee, and looked at us and said in his roaring voice, "Whoever said there is no pleasure in sense objects?" And we were at that moment stunned. Here is his work, his discourses that say there is no happiness in sense objects. But can we deny that when we drink a good cup of coffee, or eat a delicious meal, or see a spectacular show, or in a joyful company of friends, can we deny that we do experience some happiness? But our jaws dropped looking at Gurudev. Here we are thinking that we have to renounce all this, and here Gurudev is saying, "Whoever said there is no pleasure in sense objects?" And after slurping that coffee, he kept that cup of coffee and got up and walked out of the door, looking back at us again. Whoever said there is no happiness in sense objects? However, it is only temporary. Really speaking, this delusion of the mind and the illusions that it creates, its false misapprehensions and its false expectations, that we work, we struggle to get what we want, but still never get what we wanted. And that is happiness. And not happiness which is temporary, but happiness which is permanent. And permanent happiness can come only from that which is permanent, not from that which is constantly changing. And every object that we experience in the world, in this universe, is changing. And from an ever-changing world, with an ever-changing equipment, the body, mind, and intellect, can we expect permanent, everlasting happiness? And yet, day and night, we do action to get this temporary happiness, which is not even got from the object of the world. But whenever we experience happiness is when our mind becomes free of agitations, becomes calm. When we have a desire, the mind gets agitated, plans for or works to get that object of desire. In that restless activity and that agitation of the mind, we lose the peace which is natural in our mind. When we get the object of our desire, temporarily, the mind comes to a standstill. And in that quiet mind, we experience happiness. And therefore, whenever we experience happiness, whether you go to a temple to have darshan of the Lord, you wait in those long, hectic, in those long, sweaty queues, and you just get 1 or 2 seconds before they push you out. But even there, that darshan that you waited for, you close your eyes, for peace and happiness is experienced within. In sleep, there are no objects, yet we all love to sleep, because you ask someone when you had deep sleep, it was very nice. One who has discovered that happiness is not there in the sense object, and the pleasures that we mistake to be happiness are only temporary moments of quietude. When we get the object of our desire and our struggles come to an end, that is when we experience this happiness. And this happiness, when we are in our natural state of peace and quietude, which means happiness is the nature of the self, the Atma. Atma is a Sanskrit name for the self. Therefore, Atmani eva Atmana tushta. One who is satisfied in the self, by the self. Because the self is of the nature of happiness. And one who has discovered that my nature is happiness. And that happiness, no one, just as sweetness can never be removed from sugar, that happiness can never be removed from such a person of enlightenment. Atmani eva Atmana tushtaha. And such a person is not incomplete. Such a person is not wanting of anything. Such a person has no desire for anything, because he has attained the very goal of all desires. Sarvan Kaman. So, such a person who is an embodiment of happiness can only spread joy and happiness everywhere. For that person, at all times, is happiness itself. And therefore, has got nothing to give than happiness. Cannot but give happiness. And in whose presence even the most agitated person comes, the most arrogant person comes, the person who comes with all hatred cannot go without that bliss of, that drop of bliss at least. their life gets somehow the other touched, because such people are an evidence that whatever we bring to them, they are happy. And therefore we used to find Gurudev in every situation, every moment, laughing away, making us laugh, happy and spreading happiness everywhere at all times. One will wonder, what when situations change? What when situations are drastic? What when illnesses came to Gurudev? What when people were disappointing? What when you see your own children quarreling, feeling unhappy with each other? What then? Real freedom to be happy is when we know that happiness is our nature, and when there is no want, desire, or expectation of happiness from any object or thing of the world. Nothing or no one can take away that happiness from such an enlightened person. And no one can stop such a person from spreading and giving happiness to everyone around them, bringing glory to action by fulfilling the purpose of action of everyone, and that is to get happiness. To be constantly aware of that happiness within as our own nature, our own Swarupa, that is Chinmaya Ananda. The awareness of bliss. Sthita pragya tada uchyate. Tada, then that person is called a person of steady wisdom, not one who just reads books, who even is logical or can give discourses and then feel miserable and think that these are all theories. In practical life, how can we be happy? In practical life, these great masters have demonstrated, given evidence that happiness is possible in life, and it is possible for someone at all times. Do with greater dexterity, act with greater dexterity than anyone in this world, fulfilling everyone's purpose of action, and that is happiness. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.